The diner has duct tape on the corner booth seat. She notices it every single night. Third booth from the window. Left side. Always the last one she cleans. Always the tape half peeling by the time she gets to it. It stopped bothering her somewhere around year 2. That is what this kind of work does to a person. It doesn't break you. It just quietly rearranges you. Teaches you which things are worth feeling and which things you just wipe down and move on from. She is good at her job. Not because she loves it. Because her daughter's tuition doesn't negotiate, the rent doesn't apologize, and she stopped waiting for the world to be fair the day she realized the world had never agreed to that arrangement in the first place. She moves through this place the way water moves through a familiar channel. Efficient. Purposeful. Unseen. And she has spent 3 years perfecting that particular art, the art of being exactly what the room needs and nothing more. Most people who came into that diner never really saw her. They saw the uniform. They saw the coffee pot. They saw the notepad and the practiced smile and the efficient hands. But not her. Not really. Which is exactly why she noticed him the moment he walked in. Because he was looking at the room the same way she always did. Like he was trying to find the exits before he let himself settle. Not because he was loud. He wasn't. Not because he announced himself. He didn't. He just walked in the way certain people walk into rooms, like the room was already his before he entered it. He walked in at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. No umbrella. Black suit. Silver cufflinks catching the light like they had somewhere better to be. And he chose the corner booth. The one with the duct tape. He sat with his back to the wall. His eyes on both doors. And something in the room, very quietly, without drama, without anyone noticing, changed. Before we go any further, you need to understand something about this man. Because this story doesn't make sense without it. He was not the kind of man who wandered into diners. He was not the kind of man who sat in duct tape booths under flickering fluorescent lights at midnight, eating soup alone while the city moved on without him. He ran the largest Korean organized crime network on the West Coast. 14 years at the top. 3 federal investigations. 0 convictions. The kind of record that doesn't happen by accident. The kind that happens because a man is very, very careful about everything he allows himself to feel. He had enemies the way other men have acquaintances. Everywhere. Unavoidable. And almost never introduced by name. And yet. Here he was. Tuesday night. Duct tape booth. Soup getting cold because he couldn't stop watching the door. I think about that image sometimes. One of the most feared men on the West Coast. Sitting alone in a diner with duct tape on the seat, watching the door while his dinner goes cold. There is something in that picture that most people would walk right past. She didn't walk past it. She never walked past anything. She brought him water before he asked for it. Set it down without ceremony. Without the extra smile that sometimes gets used as currency in places like this. Just, water. Table. Done. He watched her walk away. Not the way men sometimes watch women in diners at midnight. The other way. The way you watch someone who did something small and unexpected and you're trying to figure out, did they know they just did that? Or was it just them? She didn't know what he did. She didn't know his name. What she knew was that he tipped 20% exactly, not $1 more, not $1 less, and that he held his shoulders like a man who had been bracing for something for so long he had forgotten he was still doing it. She had seen that particular tension before. On her father, the year the plant closed and he didn't tell anyone how bad it was until Christmas came and went without presents and nobody said a word about it. On her ex-husband, at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., staring at nothing. On herself, in the bathroom mirror on the mornings when the bank balance didn't match the days left in the month. She knew that tension the way you know an old scar. Not because you look at it every day. But because it's yours, and it remembers itself even when you've stopped thinking about it. She knew that tension. She just didn't know yet that recognizing it in him would cost her something she wasn't anywhere near prepared to pay. Most of us have had that moment. Where you look at a stranger and something in you goes, oh. I know what that is. I've worn that. Not the same story. Just the same shape. And you have to decide in the space of half a second whether to say something or keep moving. Most of the time we keep moving. She kept moving too. That night. He came back the next Tuesday. And the Tuesday after that. And the one after that. By the fourth week she had his order memorized: black coffee, soft tofu soup, no substitutions, no conversation. By the sixth week, she had started leaving his water on the table before he sat down. He noticed. He didn't say anything. But he noticed. Because men like him notice everything, it is, genuinely, the only reason men like him last as long as they do. The seventh Tuesday, she learned something about him that nobody in any federal file had ever managed to document. He was funny. Quietly. Accidentally. The way people are funny when they have absolutely no idea they're being funny, which is the only kind of funny that actually matters. The menu had a section called Flavor Adventures. He looked at it the same way every single week. The same slow blink. The same almost imperceptible tightening at the corner of his mouth. And then he ordered the soup. Every time. Without fail. Without a word about the Flavor Adventures. She started looking forward to the menu moment. She would position herself where she could see his face from exactly the right angle. She told herself it was because she was bored. That was partially true. But only partially. There is something about watching a very serious person encounter something ridiculous and try to maintain their dignity through it. It is one of the more quietly beautiful things a person can witness. She witnessed it every Tuesday for 12 weeks. And she never said a word about it to him. That kind of restraint is its own form of respect. The 8th Tuesday, he had a phone call that went badly. She couldn't hear the words. But she could read the body. The shoulders going up. The knuckles going white. The particular stillness that isn't calm, but is what calm looks like when it's holding something down hard enough to leave a mark. And then the call ended. And his head dropped. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just, forward. The way a head drops when the weight finally outpaces the pride holding it upright. The way it does when you think no one is watching and you finally let it. She saw it. 3 booths away. Hot sauce in hand. Completely still. She knew that look. She had worn it herself more times than she would ever say out loud. And the thing about recognizing something in someone else that you've only ever seen in the mirror, is that it makes it very hard to keep walking. Very hard to pretend you didn't see it. She walked over. Set a fresh cup of coffee beside his resting hand, the old one had gone cold, and said, without making a single production of it. "It'll still be hot when you're ready." 5 words. And somehow everything in that diner shifted on them. Not because they were clever. Not because they were dramatic. But because they were true, and they were offered without condition. And that, in this man's world, and honestly in most of our worlds, is rarer than it should be. Neither of them said anything else. She went back to work. He drank the coffee. But something had shifted between them. And they both felt it. And neither of them mentioned it. Because some things, once you name them, become something you have to manage. And they both had enough to manage already. The 12th Tuesday, he came in different. Not different the way most people would catch. Different the way you notice with someone you've been paying attention to, not because you decided to, but because attention given long enough becomes its own kind of knowing. His left hand had a bruise across the knuckles that the cufflink was trying to cover. He sat down like a man deciding whether the chair was trustworthy. And when she brought the soup, without being asked, same as always, he looked at it for a long moment. And then he did something he had not done in 11 Tuesdays. He spoke first. "Do you ever get tired of this place?" She looked at him for a moment. Not the professional look. The real one. The one she kept for people who had earned it without knowing they were earning it. And she said, "I get tired of a lot of things. But I keep showing up. That's all tired is, really. Just keeping on anyway. Just keeping on anyway." I have been turning that phrase over for a long time since I first heard this story. Because I think it is one of the most honest descriptions of courage I have ever come across. Not the loud kind. Not the celebrated kind. The kind that happens in diners at midnight, when nobody is watching, when the booth has duct tape on the seat and the coffee has gone cold and you are tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. That kind. The kind most of us know better than we would like to admit. He didn't answer. But something in his face, in the jaw, in the eyes, in the place where the permanent tension had lived for 14 years, shifted. Just slightly. Just barely. Just enough for someone paying attention to catch it. At the end of that night the diner was empty. She was pulling on her coat. He should have been gone an hour ago. She looked up. And he was still there. Standing at the door. Hand on the push bar. Not pushing. A man who walks through every door in his life without hesitation, standing at this one like it requires something he isn't sure he has. She walked across the empty diner. And she put her arms around him. Not romantically. Not with agenda. The way you hold someone when you can see the weight, and you know, because you have carried your own version of it, that nobody should have to carry it without someone at least acknowledging it exists. Even once. Even briefly. Even in a diner with duct tape on the seat at midnight when there is nobody else around to see it. He stood there. His arms stayed at his sides for a long moment. Then, slowly, with the particular difficulty of a man who has forgotten that this is something people do, one hand came to rest against her back. He held on for 45 seconds. He counted them. He has never told anyone that. What she didn't know. What she could not have known. Was that she was not the only one who had been watching those Tuesday nights. Two men in a dark sedan had been parked across the street for 3 consecutive Tuesdays. 3 Tuesdays. The same 3 Tuesdays he had been slowly, carefully, privately learning to breathe again. 3 days before that 12th Tuesday, 2 men knocked on her apartment door. Not loud. Not dramatic. The quiet knock is always the one that costs the most. Because you can't pretend you didn't hear it. They sat at her kitchen table. They opened a folder. And they showed her who the man in her corner booth really was. The names. The numbers. The things that happened to people who stood between him and what he needed. And a photograph. A man who had once testified against his organization. The date beneath the photograph. And the absence of any record of that man existing anywhere after that date. She sat at her kitchen table and the world she had been quietly building inside those Tuesday nights rearranged itself around what she was looking at. Because the warmth was real. She knew that. She had spent enough time around performed warmth to know the difference between something genuine and something worn like a coat. And none of that changed what was in the folder. One of them slid something across the table toward her. Small. Flat. Black. About the size of a large coin. Plain as anything. Terrible as everything. "We know where your daughter goes to school," one of them said. And then he slid the device across the table. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. She thought about her daughter. 22 years old. 3rd year of nursing school. The first person in 3 generations of their family who was going to finish what she started. And she thought about what it would mean if she didn't. She picked up the device. She said yes. She went home and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark for 2 hours. She did not turn on the lights. She just sat there with what she had agreed to, in the dark, the way you sit with something when you already know there is no unagreeing to it. There is no version of this part of the story that is comfortable to sit with. And I think that is exactly the point. Because the world she was trying to protect her daughter from and the world she was being asked to help dismantle were not entirely different worlds. They were both worlds built on people with power applying pressure to people without it. And she was caught exactly in the middle. With a device in her hand and a daughter's photograph on the wall and no clean way forward. She had the device in her left uniform pocket all shift. She checked it 3 times before he arrived. Touched it once while making coffee. Let her hand rest flat on the counter above it while she watched the door. And she thought about 45 seconds. And what they had cost nothing to give and were about to cost everything. He came in at 11:47. Same as always. Corner booth. She brought the water. She brought the soup. They went through the familiar rhythms of their Tuesday the way you go through the movements of something you love while knowing it is ending. And the hardest thing about that, the thing nobody tells you, is how much it still feels like itself, even when it isn't anymore. At 11:58, he looked up and said, quietly, "You're different tonight." "Long week," she said. He nodded. He understood long weeks. He had been having them for 14 years. She cleared the table when he was done. Brought the bill. He paid in cash, correct to the dollar, 20% exactly. Same as always. The last same as always there would ever be. And then he stood. Put on his coat. And walked to the door. She followed him to the door. She told herself it was to collect a cup left at the counter near the entrance. She did not look too closely at that explanation. She had learned a long time ago that sometimes you have to let yourself believe the smaller version of the truth just to keep moving. She stopped beside him at the door. He turned. And she stepped forward. Her left hand found the inside breast pocket. The device pressed through the fabric. Flat against the seam. Still. Done. And she held on. Because she needed it to feel exactly the same as it had before. Because she needed to give him that, even if she couldn't give him anything else. His arms came around her back. His chin dropped slightly toward her head. His breathing slowed. 45 seconds. He counted them again. She counted them too. For entirely different reasons. When she stepped back, she looked at his face. The jaw slightly unclenched. The dark eyes warm and unguarded. A man who has just been held and is still carrying the warmth of it without knowing what else he is carrying. She smiled at him. Not the professional smile. The real one. Because even now, even inside this, the warmth she felt toward him was real. And she needed him to have that. The real smile. Even if it was the last true thing she could give him. And then she went back to work. Because that is all tired is, really. Just keeping on anyway. He found it at 4 a.m. Not because a scanner caught it. Because in 14 years at the top, he had developed the nightly habit of checking his jacket lining before he slept. Every pocket. Every seam. Every edge. The way other men check that the stove is off. You do it long enough, you stop thinking about why. Your hands just know. He held the tracker between 2 fingers. And just looked at it. Turned it slowly. The way you turn over something that might change everything once you acknowledge what it is. He set it on the desk. Sat down. Both hands flat on the surface on either side of it. And he sat there for a long time. Not planning. Not calculating. Not doing any of the things 14 years had trained him to do the moment something like this appeared in his life. He did not make a phone call. He did not summon anyone. He did not begin the process his organization required when a breach of this kind was discovered. He just sat with it. Which, for a man like him, was perhaps the most extraordinary thing he had ever done. He thought about the water glass that was always there before he sat down. He thought about the menu with the flavor adventures and the soup he ordered every single week without comment. He thought about a voice saying, "It'll still be hot when you're ready," and the exact quality of warmth in it. Not performed. Not strategic. Simply offered. The way you offer something to a person when you can see they need it and you don't need anything back. He was not naive. He knew she had not acted alone. Someone had found the one angle he had left unguarded, the one place he had forgotten, or perhaps chosen, not to build a wall, and applied pressure to it. And she had been the pressure. Of course she had. Because who else had he let close enough? The anger was there. He knew exactly what to do with anger. He had been managing it since before he could name it. It was the other thing underneath the anger that he did not know what to do with. The thing that felt less like fury and more like loss. The particular grief of a man who had, for 12 consecutive Tuesday nights, allowed himself to believe that one quiet corner of the world might be safe. And now held the evidence, between two fingers, that it was not. He picked up the tracker one more time. Looked at it. Set it in the desk drawer. Closed the drawer. And did not make a single phone call. Not that night. Here is what the federal file recorded: the tracking device went dark approximately 4 hours after placement. Signal moved normally for 90 minutes, his car, his building, his floor, and then simply stopped. No movement. No location update. Nothing. The agents wrote "device failure" in the report. They moved on. They always had other avenues. What the federal file did not record, what it had no language for, was what happened the following Tuesday. And the Tuesday after that. And the one after that. On the 4th Tuesday after, 5 weeks after the tracker, 4 weeks after the signal went dark, she arrived for her shift and found an envelope on the counter. With her name on it. Not her full name. Just Ada. Written in handwriting that was precise. Controlled. And told you everything about the person who had held the pen. Inside the envelope, no note. No explanation. No accusation. No threat. Inside the envelope was the tracking device. Returned. Intact. Unbroken. She held it in her palm for a long time. Turned it slowly. The way you turn something over when you are trying to understand what it means that it came back to you instead of being used against you. She understood two things simultaneously, standing there behind the counter of a diner with duct tape on the corner booth seat. The first thing was this: he knew. He had known since 4 a.m. on the morning after the 12th Tuesday. And he had chosen, deliberately, at real cost, against every protocol his world required, to return the device rather than use it. Against her. Against whoever sent her. Against the pressure she had been put under that she could not have survived refusing. He had chosen to absorb the cost of her betrayal rather than make her pay it. A man who had never, in 14 years at the top, absorbed a cost that wasn't his. The second thing, the harder thing, the thing she would carry for a long time after, was this: by returning the device, he was letting her keep the evidence of what she had done. Not as punishment. As a particular, complicated form of respect. The kind that says, "I know what this cost you. I know you had no clean choice. I know the shape of the impossible position you were standing in. And I am not going to pretend otherwise by making you disappear. You get to keep the evidence. You get to live with it. And so do I." She put the device in her uniform pocket. She finished her shift. She wiped down the tables. She refilled the condiments. She cleaned the corner booth, same as always, duct tape still half peeling, the table smooth and ready for whoever might need somewhere to sit next. And before she left that night, she set a cup of coffee on the corner booth table. Fresh. Hot. Full. The diner was empty. Nobody was coming. She knew that. She set it there anyway. Because some things you do not do for the person who is present. You do them for the truth of what was there. For the 45 seconds. For the menu with the flavor adventures and the soup ordered every single week without comment. For the shoulders that came down 1 single degree when someone offered warmth without condition. For the voice that said, "It'll still be hot when you're ready," without knowing how far that promise would have to travel before it was kept. Without knowing what it would cost to keep it. She turned off the lights. She walked to the door. She pushed it open and stepped out into the November air, cold, rain just beginning, and she let the door close behind her. Inside, in the dark, on the corner booth table with the duct tape on the seat. A cup of coffee. Still hot. Still waiting. Most of us will never be in a story like this one. Not with the stakes this high. Not with the choices this impossible. But most of us have had our version of that corner booth. The place where someone saw us when we weren't performing. Where someone brought the coffee without being asked and said the right thing in 5 words or fewer. Where someone held on for 45 seconds and we let them. Where something real happened in a room that the rest of the world would walk right past without a second glance. And most of us have also had our version of the impossible choice. The thing we agreed to that we wish we hadn't. The decision we made to protect someone that cost us something we didn't know we were paying until it was already gone. The moment we had to smile the real smile even while doing the hardest thing. And keep on anyway. That is what this story is really about. Not the tracker. Not the organization. Not the federal file or the dark sedan parked across the street. Those are just the frame. The painting inside the frame is something much older and much simpler. It is about 2 people who, for 12 Tuesday nights in a row, in a diner with duct tape on the corner booth seat, managed to be genuinely real with each other inside a world that had given both of them every reason not to be. And about what it costs to betray something real. And what it means when the person you betrayed looks at the evidence of it and chooses, at 4 a.m., to put it in a drawer instead of using it. And about a cup of coffee left on a table in the dark for someone who may never come back. But who was real? Who was present? Who sat in the corner booth with his shoulders up near his ears and let himself, for 45 seconds, and he counted them, and he has never told anyone that, put them down. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything.